Have you ever caught yourself wondering what on earth inspired the design of the Trade Federation's B1 Battle Droids in canon? Pondered the question of how many loos were present on a certain iconic spaceship? Or even just questioned what happened to those younglings and Padawans who didn't graduate Jedi school? Well, you are in luck. This list is about to provide you with the pretty darn unbelievable answers to those rather specific questions. And more! Because I am Gareth, this is What Culture Star Wars, and here are 10 unbelievable Star Wars facts that are somehow true. Number 10, B1 Battle Droids were designed to resemble Geonosians. Ever since the day they debuted in the Star Wars universe during 1999's Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, folks have no doubt been wondering what in the hell went into the designing of these little battle droid nuisances. It was ultimately shown in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, that the B1 battle droids were manufactured on the planet Geonosis, and it turns out that they were actually designed to resemble the flying alien creatures found on that sandy planet, according to the Star Wars Character Encyclopedia, updated and expanded canon reference book. Now that is a mouthful. These droids were also ridiculously cheap to produce, hence why the Separatists were never that bothered about waves of the little mechanical menaces being wiped out during the Clone Wars. The resemblance between the Geonosians and the increasingly comical droid soldiers they designed has honestly been staring you in the face for decades. I mean, just look at them side by side. And elsewhere, droidicas were designed by the Colicoid species, an insectoid race that also opted to make their droids look somewhat like themselves. Again, look at them, they look just alike. Because why the hell not, eh? Number 9, Owen Lars' brother played Obi-Wan's stunt double. It is well known at this point that one of Joel Edgerton's first high-profile roles came during the Star Wars prequel trilogy, with the eventual superstar playing the part of Owen Lars, Luke Skywalker's eventual uncle in both episodes 2 and 3. But what you may not have realised is that Joel wasn't actually the only Edgerton to grace a Star Wars set during the making of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. It turns out that Joel's brother Nash was the stunt double for none other than the mighty Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, Ewan McGregor. And that isn't the only well-known project Nash has thrown himself into over the years either, with the Edgerton man popping up in the likes of The Matrix, Moulin Rouge, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood too. Though all of those other productions likely had their cool moments during shooting, you can bet nothing quite compared to walking around set or flailing a lightsaber as one of the most iconic Jedi of all time. Number 8, there is another lightsaber-resistant metal. And while on the subject of the legendary weapon of the Jedi and Sith, it's generally accepted that these laser swords can cut through the majority of materials found in the Star Wars universe. Except for Beskar, of course, the ridiculously strong alloy used to create Mandalorian armor. But that isn't the only metal capable of giving lightsaber wielders a headache. As seen in the likes of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and the Clone Wars animated series, the Magna Guards, often found beside General Grievous, boasted an electro staff made of frick, one of the other materials out there that could withstand the heat of a lightsaber swipe. Though it is worth noting that they weren't completely invulnerable to the weapons, and the Dark Lord of the Sith himself, Sheev Palpatine, was also quite the fan of this durable material, using it when building his own red-bladed lightsabers that he'd ultimately swing at the likes of Mace Windu and Yoda. In Legends, the metal was also used to create the intimidating Dark Troopers too. Put simply, Beskar wasn't the only way to counter the coolest weapon in the galaxy. But do you know of any of the other lightsaber-resistant metals out there in the galaxy far, far away? Well, you drop them in the comment section down below. Do it! Number 7, Mace Windu nearly showed up in the original trilogy. Decades before he showed up in the worlds of Star Wars as one of the most respected and badass Jedi Masters of all time, Mace Windu was actually on the verge of appearing in the original trilogy. Back when George Lucas was putting together the script for what would become 1977's first Star Wars picture, the mind behind the Force included a character by the name of Mace Windu in early drafts for the flick. Windu originally acted as the narrator of the film, but the character then ultimately went through a few different incarnations in various drafts, being the brother of Princess Leia or Luke Skywalker's friend, before Lucas eventually decided Mace didn't need to be present in these particular movies at all. And if one unbelievable Windu fact wasn't enough for you know that legendary purple lightsaber Samuel L. Jackson is seen igniting throughout the prequels? That wasn't actually always Windu's colour of choice. Those who rushed out to grab themselves their very own Mace action figure back when Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was released in 1999, discovered that this Jedi initially opted for a blue lightsaber, with Jackson then later nudging Lucas to give him a purple blade, so he could spot himself in the Battle of Geonosis during Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Number 6. Ithorians possess 4 throats. The Star Wars franchise is home to some of the most bizarre, quirky, and intriguing alien species ever to appear on screen. And perhaps the most fascinating of the lot can be seen in the likes of the Book of Boba Fett, the Clone Wars animated series, and even as far back as in the first ever Star Wars feature. Ithorians, or the alien with a head shaped like a giant L as you likely know it, have made their presence felt throughout the galaxy. Some have gone on to use the Force and become Jedi, others took a different path and turned to bounty hunting. And then there were those who simply enjoyed a spot of gardening. Also, on top of boasting a whopping 2 different mouths and stomachs, these hammerheads also possessed a staggering 4 throats. All that inner machinery resulted in a ridiculously low, rumbling voice, but one that wasn't able to utter the galactic basic standard language spoken by much of the galaxy. That's why these folks can often be found speaking the language folks on Earth know as English, via things like translator collars. So there you have it, these compelling Ithorians are so much more than just a bunch of pretty faces. Cheers for tapping on this What Culture Star Wars video today. We love having you here, and if you like what you see, then hit that subscribe button down below. Number 5. Firearms exist in this galaxy. If Obi-Wan Kenobi felt Star Wars blasters were so uncivilized, you can only imagine what the wise Jedi Master would have thought of this far more familiar alternative to that fantasy blaster bolt firer. When you think of your average rebel, clone trooper, stormtrooper, battle droid, or smuggler shooting at whatever enemy was heading their way, a bright shot of light erupting out the end of an awesome looking rifle/pistol of sorts typically springs to mind. However, that's not to say that the sort of weapon folks on our own planet would use on the battlefield doesn't exist in the galaxy far, far away too. Firearms are very much present in Star Wars, although they typically go by the name of slug throwers, firing out quote-unquote slugs, also known as solid projectiles, from pistols, rifles, and scatterguns. That last explosive weapon has popped up in places like the Star Wars Battlefront video games over the years, and slug throwers are said to be a right pain in the ass for Jedi in particular, largely due to the fact they can't simply deflect the slugs as they would a blaster bolt. Instead, the slugs just melt after connecting with a lightsaber blade, leading to hot metal shooting all over the place mid-duel. What a nightmare. Number 4. One clone trooper survived all the way to the sequels. While it is widely known that one iconic member of the 501st Legion of Clone Troopers did survive all the way to the end of the Galactic Civil War, as a certain little green legend once put it, there is another. In fact, said other not called Captain Rex didn't just manage to keep from being blown to bits in both the Clone and Galactic Civil Wars, meaning they survived the prequel and original trilogy. This good soldier made it all the way to the time of the sequels. The clone medic known as Kix was actually one of the first people to discover the inhibitor chip hidden within every single trooper, was part of Chancellor Palpatine's plan to rid the galaxy of the Jedi once and for all. But after learning of this horrifying truth, he was frozen in stasis before the transport he was being carried on was brought down, and crash-landed on Ponema Terminal. Then, 50 years on from that event, Sidon Ithano, the red bloke seen in Maz Kanata's castle in Episode 7 The Force Awakens, and the rest of his pirate mates unfroze the clone after finding him on that world. From here, he learned of all the madness that had occurred during his long sleep, and eventually joined their squad. Own his armor of choice going forward, a cool as hell blue and red version of the Phase 1 clone trooper armor naturally, as seen in the Tales of Villainy, the Crimson Corsair, and the Crime Lords of the Barren Rim comic story. Number 3. Han and Chewie share the one bathroom on the Millennium Falcon. Here's one that's probably, and quite understandably, never crossed your mind. The bestest of space pals, known as Han Solo and Chewbacca, spent years soaring across the galaxy in their equally iconic Millennium Falcon. And with all that time blasting through hyperspace and just generally existing on that YT-1300 light freighter, naturally the pair would have needed somewhere to, do their business. And this is where the rather unbelievable truth comes in. The bloke from Corellia and the Mountain of Fur from Kashyyyk shared the very same bathroom on the Falcon, aka a refresher in this galaxy far, far away. No, not the sweet. As seen in Solo, a Star Wars story, Wookiees certainly are fond of a shower, so you can bet Han spent more than a few mornings having to pluck out his pal's unmistakable hair, or using the crapper in the wake of nature calling for Chewie. That's assuming the big guy poops like your average humanoid, of course. Admittedly, installing a second bathroom may have taken up a little too much space in the old bird, but an additional refresher surely would have made both crew members' lives that little bit easier, right? Number 2, lightsabers have charging ports. In case you didn't know, your average lightsaber is primarily powered by a diatium power cell. And while these generally didn't need to be plugged into a power source to recharge due to the cell's natural recharging abilities, according to Legends lore, some did actually come fitted with their own charging ports for those rare occasions when they were running a little low on juice. In fact, the legendary Qui-Gon Jinn's own laser sword actually boasted one of said ports towards the bottom of his Jedi weapon, as spotted by one eagle-eyed fan on Reddit. It's also worth noting that the energy/magnetic field which held in the plasma beam being emitted from the lightsaber also helped recycle that energy back into the Diatium power cell during those moments it wasn't clashing with another lightsaber or being used to cut through a solid object. In other words, when it wasn't being used to fight or cut on the regular, the Diatium power cell was super efficient and wouldn't require any additional charging. Battling through the Clone Wars or frequently cutting through giant metal doors though, you're probably going to need a USB lead. Number 1, what happened to younglings and Padawans who failed their training? Largely because it's hardly touched on during the Star Wars Skywalker saga, promising younglings and Padawans failing their training and their trials was actually a more common occurrence than you realised. But rather than just booting these potential Jedi out of the temple doors and welcoming in the next batch of new Force-sensitive souls, the Order had those who still wanted to do their part to help join the Jedi Service Corps. This group still served the Galactic Republic, either due to the fact they simply wanted to help or had abilities that made them useful, but they weren't lightsaber wielders. Though when the Clone Wars kicked off, it didn't take long for the Service Corps to militarize. And within the Service Corps were 4 separate branches. The Agricultural Corps, a group focused on researching plants from around the galaxy. The Exploration Corps, a team that discovered many of the galaxy's lost secrets and mapped out many a hyperspace route. The Medical Corps, those who assisted in the healing of folks. And the Education Corps, teachers who passed on their knowledge to the next generation. Not everyone who washed out of the academy opted to join, of course, with some understandably packing their bags and leaving the life of the Jedi behind for good after failing their training. However, for those who weren't ready to just walk away from such a massive part of their life, the Jedi Service Corps was a sort of second chance at making a difference in this galaxy far, far away. Which is kinda cool, really.